The weekend of November 8th, we had released the Snyder Cut trending once again on the Twitter because Jason Momoa, the Aquaman himself, had tweeted, one of the usual black and white images from the Snyder Cut. This time it was of him actually skewering Steppenwolf with his trident. Right. And he just said hashtag release the Snyder Cut. And so that got it trending on Twitter. And,
Instagram, actually.
It was on Twitter too.
Well, it trended
he posted on Instagram, but it was trending on Twitter.
Yeah, but you said he posted on Twitter, which would imply that it was his account that was...
I think I said Instagram.
You absolutely said Twitter, and it was killing me when you said it.
Okay, well, audience, you go back and you see which one of us is telling the truth.
Yeah, so he posted it to Instagram. It eventually caught wind on Twitter because, of course, it did. The fan community is nothing if not persistent. We've spoken a lot about Release the Snyder Cut in the past. We've talked a lot about the hashtag. We've basically made a video every time it's trended on Twitter. So I feel like we should give some background to the whole thing just to, first of all, pad out the runtime of the podcast, but to, let people who might not be as familiar with the whole controversy, I wouldn't even call it a controversy, the whole story behind this whole thing.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, which at this point, if you don't know, are you under a rock? Are you in a cave? Were you just lost in the Speed Force? Justice League came out, and as we know, Zack Snyder was taken off the project when he had most of the film done already, and then the studio got in Joss Whedon. They reshot a bunch of the scenes. They had to get Henry Cavill back from doing Mission Impossible, and he had he had his mustache, and he was contractually obligated to not shave it. Like, it wasn't allowed that he could do that, so they had to invest all this money into CGIing off his mustache, which turned out terrible, even though there's so many deepfake videos on the internet now, which are done, they're done pretty much easily, I'm going to say, and a studio with millions of dollars could probably take one of that, but I don't know if there's any kind of proprietary software rights involved in that. Anyway, the movie came out, sucked, a lot of people didn't like it, and a lot of people really wanted to see what Zack Snyder's original vision for it was, because he was the one they hired to do this whole trilogy of films to kind of start off this whole DC extended universe on film. He's the one who set the tone, and everyone wants to see what he really had in store, because the movie, it's also come out that Warner Brothers also mandated the movie had to be cut down below 2 hours. So a lot of what he filmed was cut out, wasn't finished, but now we know it's there. We know it's done. Jason Momoa himself said in an interview, "I've seen it, it's finished." And the guy interviewing asked him, he said, "But aren't the special effects still not done?" And Jason Momoa, he didn't directly confirm, but he said, "Oh, you think he couldn't? You think he couldn't do that? You think he couldn't get that done?" So he seemed to imply that somehow Snyder was able to pull all the strings necessary, and he has a completed version of the film. And so that's why it trended then, and now it's trending again, or it was 2 days ago or a day ago as of recording this, because Gal Gadot, who was Wonder Woman, posted on Instagram. She posted another screenshot, said release the Snyder Cut, then put it on Twitter, then Ben Affleck said it. Then Zack Snyder himself retweeted those, and then we had everyone getting in on it. We had Ray Fisher, Cyborg, we had Joe Manganiello, Deathstroke, Jeremy Irons, who was Alfred, Rob Liefeld, the creator of Deadpool, Kevin Smith, who else? Michael Rosenbaum replied to Kevin Smith's post. Who am I missing here? The guy that played Black Manta in Aquaman tweeted it. David Ayer, Dave Bautista. Everyone is getting in on it now. The world knows, and all these media outlets are reporting, like New York Times and all this stuff, and different TV channels. I've seen screenshots posted. So the word is really out. It got 750,000 tweets about it. That was what the trend was showing. 750,000 tweets over the course of a day.
I'm sure it's more by now, yeah. It's worth mentioning, with Ray Fisher, who played Cyborg, the only tweet on his account currently is release the Snyder Cut with that black and white frame. It just shows how desired it is just among the cast and crew and just among the fan base, So why did they hire Joss Whedon in the first place? We mentioned,
Avengers.
Yeah, well, that was part of the reason, but I meant, why did they hire someone other than Zack Snyder? So, first of all, the story is that Zack Snyder, I believe he lost his daughter right around the time that they announced the hiring of Joss Whedon. By that point, it was sort of revealed that they had shot about 90% of the film. Basically, everything that Joss Whedon was hired for was reshoots. So why hire Joss Whedon in the first place? You probably know this already if you're listening to this, but so the prior DC Extended Universe films, which were Man of Steel, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, and Suicide Squad, all received sort of mixed to negative reviews. The fan community was sort of divided on it. I'd say more of the diehard comic fans were more in favor of some of these movies than more casual viewers. Critics were not happy with any of them, really.
Wonder Woman did well, though.
Yeah, Wonder Woman did well. Oh, yeah, I guess that did come before Justice League, didn't it?
Yeah, that was the one thing where everyone was like, "Oh, wow, a good movie! It's so great!" And I was like, "Oh, it's good."
It's like a generic
amazing
Marvel movie, basically.
Yeah, but without being too Marvel-y.
Yeah, no, it's I think still probably a little bit darker than the standard Marvel offering, and so here's the reason really why they went with Joss Whedon and they went in this direction. Because of the criticism that surrounded these movies, them being too dark, too edgy, too deep, which, some people were making. I think that's just sort of the loudest point that really came out of the whole thing. I don't even know if that's necessarily true, that they were too dark or too moody or too...
Warner Brothers did this exact same thing when Green Lantern came out, and they thought that the biggest problem with it was the tone. Because that's when they went full... That's why they hired Zack Snyder, because they said, okay, we tried the lighter tone with Green Lantern, and that didn't work out. For absolutely no other reasons. It was definitely just the tone why that movie didn't work out. So let's hire Zack Snyder to do a dark tone like the Dark Knight trilogy, which we know was successful. So that's how this all got started. Warner Brothers is so tone deaf. They're just so blind. As Michael Rosenbaum said, do they even listen to anyone? That's what he tweeted, and I agree.
And here's the thing. Wonder Woman did do really well. It grossed a ridiculous amount of money at the box office relative to its budget. It was I think the highest grossing female-led franchise ever at that point. So it goes to sort of support the Warner Brothers delusion that a lighter tone is what audiences want. That just automatically making a lighter movie is more family friendly. It's going to please the critics. It is worth mentioning that, looking at the Rotten Tomatoes scores, Justice League actually did have a higher rating than both Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman. I don't think it necessarily proves anything, but yeah.
Wonder Woman's just simpler. It just has a simpler story. Like Man of Steel, you have all these big themes with the whole history of this planet and the politics going on there. And then, of course, Clark growing up and trying to figure out who he is, whether he can trust the world, and all of the parallels to him being, a savior-like figure. And then him having to choose, which world do I save? Do I let Krypton try to restart, or, Earth? And then, Dawn of Justice, of course, had a lot of themes and a lot of plot threads that weren't continued. And then, of course, Suicide Squad was all over the place. So it wasn't the tone that's the issue. It's just getting a focus, getting a straight focus on a singular story point. But, it doesn't always have to be simple. Again, that's not always the major issue with these things.
So the thing is, Snyder did sort of have an inconsistent track record before any of these movies came out. I think most of his movies did have mixed reviews. 300, Dawn of the Dead, Watchmen, of course. But
I liked all of those.
Yeah, so did I. But again, I'm just trying to speak collectively here. They all sort of had mixed reviews going in. That being said, Snyder did have sort of lofty ambitions. He did want to make a more complex movie. That clearly didn't jive with what Warner Brothers wanted later on down the line.
Well, what if the money was there, or if they thought the money was there? To them, they only see dollar signs. They don't care about story. I mean, they're a big company. That's what they're all like. Like, every single company that's handled Terminator, which we will get to, has only made sequels exclusively to make money and sell it as a brand. It was never about doing the right story.
Right. So I think you could say that even Suicide Squad, that early on, was sort of a course correction, It was a much simpler movie than I think Man of Steel or Batman v Superman ever was. And, I think for the most part, just given the fandom surrounding like Harley Quinn and given how much merchandise they sold during that whole thing, it did pay to sort of go that simpler route. They thought it would be more fan-pleasing. The fact is, if you had one defined vision, like if you had Joss Whedon directing it from the first place, it probably would have been a better movie. If you had Zack Snyder actually complete his version and have that released theatrically, it probably would have been a better movie. Mm-hmm. So I think the real reason why Release the Snyder Cut has received so much attention, and the reason why fans have been calling for it, is because we knew that a better version of that movie had to exist. We knew that basically anyone with a singular vision could have made a better movie than that.
Yeah, I mean, we could have.
Yeah, no doubt.
Or at least written it better.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think regardless of what you think of Zack Snyder as a person, regardless of whether you even like superhero movies or not, like, you have to at least agree that if the person was hired to create this whole thing from the beginning, and he had a specific vision that was intended, that was all rewritten at the last minute, like, that's not right. We should be able to see what was actually intended from the start. Remember, it's just like with the Richard Donner cut for Superman 2. Richard Donner was hired to direct Superman 1 and 2. And he had a whole story planned for both movies. And he had actually was filming them back to back and had done about, I think, half of Superman 2 until they replaced him. And then they redid a bunch of things and the ending was changed. Originally, the ending of 2 was supposed to be the one where he flies around the Earth and turns back time, not 1. That wasn't supposed to happen in the first movie. So I really hope that it doesn't take another, 26 years or however long it was for the Donner Cut to come out for us to get the Snyder Cut. But considering we have the Justice League members themselves, among others, coming out to support this, I think Warner Brothers has to cave. They have to. You're losing money by not releasing it now. Come on.
Yeah, no, I think... while the demand's high here, and I think while the demand is growing, like, now is the time to release this thing, It's
as
clear
I said
that the
on
fans,
Twitter,
yeah.
What was it? Twitter on November 8th. Clock's ticking.
Yeah.
70 retweets on that, or 70 likes. It was like 50 retweets. Nice.
That's really good. That's like probably one of your most retweeted, liked, most engaged, I guess, tweets.
Yeah, it actually got retweeted by one of the Release the Snyder Cut Twitter pages that has like 17,000 followers, or does it have more? I don't know. It has a bunch, and it's like the main one.
Right. Well, that's
so
awesome.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah.
Okay, so what was I saying? Oh yeah, how could they release this? So first of all, apparently, like, I've heard varying numbers. Apparently, like 90% of the principal photography was finished under Snyder's watch. There's probably a lot more footage that could support the cut that was shot while Joss Whedon was in power. So it would really just take a good editor and a decent visual effects team to really bring this thing to fruition. Apparently, the cut already does exist in some form. I think it was Jason Momoa who initially said, "I've seen the cut. It's real. It's awesome. Watch it." So it's really just a matter of distribution, as far as I can tell. Like, I think they could release it direct to video, and fans would probably like go for it. If there's really no more money to invest in it beyond distribution, I can't imagine there's going to be too much of a loss on that.
Yeah, I see people saying it would be a good way to sell the new HBO Max thing. Would be to release it on there, but I mean, come on, you got to release it on video too.
Well, I'd say DC Universe is the obvious choice.
Yeah, that too.
But yeah, I mean, even if they released it theatrically, I think there's enough of a demand that they could make their money back on it,
Yeah, and the thing is, like, this was like our one chance to get a Justice League movie that we've been waiting for how long? I don't know. I always wanted to see a Justice League film before Avengers. It just so happened that Avengers came out first. And, I was really hyped for that, and it was great when it came out. And so now it's time for the DC heroes to get their shot, and instead of getting something grand like Avengers was, we got this. And it just doesn't feel right. It feels like it's a wound that hasn't been closed yet, something that's unresolved. We need closure.
Well, it's like, you got to think about it from Warner Brothers' perspective to some extent, right? Like, they saw how widely popular and widely successful the Marvel Cinematic Universe was, and they clearly rushed through their foundational films to try to get to the team-up movie. And unfortunately, it just didn't come out anywhere near as well as fans would have expected. So it begs the question, why waste that entire investment, if they really spent all this time and money like putting this thing together, wouldn't it be a no-brainer to release this finished cut to the public? Like, if it does go over better, if it does become a more popular film, then they could actually continue on with this world they've sort of started to create, and they could course correct and actually probably still salvage this universe, with this being the official cut. And I think ultimately that's what fans want. You know, fans actually do like the way these characters have been portrayed. I think everyone's been relatively happy with the casting choices so far and with a lot of the creative decisions for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of people liked Henry Cavill as Superman. A lot of people liked Batfleck, despite all the disparaging remarks about him initially. I think everyone likes Wonder Woman.
Yep.
A lot of people liked the Ezra Miller Flash.
Loved Ezra.
A lot of people like Jason Momoa Aquaman.
Mm-hmm.
And Cyborg, he didn't even really get a chance, though, because his whole backstory was going to be told in the Justice League movie, and it was all cut out. So it's like, for that reason alone, the Snyder Cut should exist. I mean, it should be released because, you know, we have a whole character here, a whole actor who was promised this whole arc, and he didn't get it. They just dumped it. Like, what do we even get? We just see him talking to his dad in, like, a room, and that's all the build-up for him that we get. Otherwise, he's just like their USB drive that they put into the mother box at the end. That's about all the function he serves. They had a whole story with him in high school playing football. They showed his family. It's like, we need to get that. Come on.
So, I mean, I will say, like, just given how much time has passed since the original screening of Justice League, since the theatrical cut was released, we have had, like, 2 separate Cyborg origin stories just between Titans and Young Justice, so it's not, like, as big of a draw now, but it would be worth exploring if that was part of Snyder's vision. It would have given his whole creation and his whole presence in the film a little more impact than just being essentially a living MacGuffin, you know?
Yeah, that's the whole thing with this newer version of Cyborg, because as of the New 52, he was all based on, like, the mother box and Apocalypse technology instead of just being, you know, a guy who was in an accident and then was reconstructed with technology. Yeah. It's, you know, it has a more alien element to it.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think that's really all we can really say about the Snyder Cut.
Release it, damn it.
Yeah, exactly. Now! Hashtag release the Snyder Cut. Hashtag...
Or very soon, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of good has come from the movement, like the whole support for American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, because they ran campaigns for San Diego Comic-Con and New York Comic-Con to get donations to actually put up billboards and screens on, like, Times Square and have planes flying with the banner. That's, you know, that also released the Snyder Cut. So that there was an organized campaign to make these things happen, and half of the donation money went to this charity. So it's like, there's nothing bad about this. Sure, you might have some people in it who suck, as with all things. There might be some, you know, people in social media who are annoying, but you can't take that to represent the majority. You got to look at the impact it's having on a broad scale, and from my point of view, it's all good, man. It's all good.